Newcastle, nice to see a new face or two here. Gordon, very welcome. This afternoon we've got the pleasure of Mark Cockin, who's going to be coming on to give a talk on the conspiracy, the esoteric, and if you have any questions on that, the way I ask you to do it is you have got paper and pens. There's going to be a lot of stuff we'll talk about that you'll probably not have a clue about, so if there's anything, then I ask that you put it in a note. And how I propose to run it is that Mark's going to come on for 45 minutes, he'll do a talk, he'll take a few questions, and then we'll have a break for the nicotine lovers in the audience. Now, the second part of his talk is going to try and include some of the questions that you'll have made a note of, and he'll try and include that in the second part of his talk. So without further ado, could we have a big hand and introduce Mark?
This is fun. I should explain, there's been no real preparation put into this, and the reason for that, although I shouldn't destroy it hopefully, the reason for that is there's so many subject areas. I've seen so many people giving presentations on different aspects of what's actually going on and trying to enlighten others as to how it all works. And they spend perhaps too much time with their presentations itself. What I've found over the years, and I've always worked behind the scenes on this, never in the public eye, so this is all new to me up until I appeared on TV 18 months ago, and it's all sort of kicked off from there. So, not wanting to make any excuses, I've never spoken in public before. The closest I've ever got to that is training rooms in a building society or a bank or whatever. So it dawned on me that to actually take on the huge subject area that I want to take on, because I do have insights which I found over the years actually help people if they can be communicated in the right way. To take on this subject is a vast one. That's why, if you have questions, write them down. I will try and draw you into conversation at some point anyway, or individuals, however it goes. And we'll really wing it, because there are things that I want to cover, and I will constantly try to bring it round to that subject area. And if something is, in my view, not relevant to today, I'll politely try and move on from it. If you have any serious questions about anything, jot them down. I'll take them at the end of this session and try and incorporate it into where it goes afterwards, as has been pointed out. So, where do you start? Certainly, this is perhaps a more friendly audience than any I could ever expect. Previously, it's been a TV camera, and they don't bite. So they tell you anyway. The point is that we in this room mostly have woken up at some point, and this phrase "woken up" is a bit patronising, but there you go. It's one that everyone seems to understand. We've woken up to varying degrees. We've been triggered into that awakening, for want of a better word, by different things. Each and every one of us will have our own story. It's not my intention to sit here and tell you mine, or, well, I will touch on things, I will point out my experience, and try and qualify it for you. But what I'm not going to do is prove anything to you. I'm going to let you do that, because that actually is the key. I've seen too many speakers saying you must believe this, you must believe that, this is how it works. And when some subject areas are touched upon, such as numerology, the esoteric side of the conspiracy, and all this sort of thing, it does get very complex, and quite honestly, if you haven't got a head for numbers, it will put you to sleep. I've seen all of this, wonderful diagrams, geometry, sacred geometry, it's all great, but do you take it in? Does an individual take it in? Some do. I know there's a couple in this room who do. And probably more than that. Each person has their own level of understanding. I fell into this 30 years ago, and that particular path brought me to David Icke, many others, who were trying to talk about these things at the time. Prior to that, my path had led me into, I was a mortgage specialist basically, banking, finance, as I think I've mentioned once before, not that it's any great accolade, I was the youngest or second youngest, we still don't know, person to attain the fellowship of the Chartered Institute of Bankers. That's worthless. In fact, I've torn the certificates up a long time ago. The whole point of becoming a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Bankers is to understand their system. Well, I found anomalies in that system, and I simply wanted to have a better understanding. So, being me, I pursued them, which caused a little bit of hassle in the career. Being the youngest person, second youngest, whatever, to attain that, people took interest in me. People I didn't know. You can imagine, this is where the secret societies come in. Your Freemasons, your Druids, you name them, they're out there. And because I had these letters attached to my name at such a young age, somebody somewhere thought, he's the sort of guy we can use. Well, that's what I let them believe for many years. I will state now, I am not, nor have I been, a member of a secret society. All right? I have, however, been dragged into them, persuaded to join them. The Freemasons being the obvious one. I had 2 or 3 years of great fun saying, no, I'm not going to join the Freemasons. And then one day saying, all right, I concede, I'll join. Then they ask you a series of questions, one of which is, are you a member of any other secret societies? I don't know, I'm not, but I fully understand what you will teach me at 33rd degree and beyond, which caused utter silence. I then had to explain myself. The reason I got to know this was because I independently took a look at, does anyone here know this phrase, the Eightfold Way? Do we have any Buddhists or anyone who follows what you could call the New Age? The Eightfold Way underlies history. 8 will keep coming into this talk today, as will a few other numbers. And what I want to do is try and show you what these numbers mean. You have people out there with numerology say, oh, the number 19, you're going to have a shit day today. You know? It's crap. There is an element of truth in it, but the way it's portrayed today is pure crap. And it's picked up by people within, for want of a better word, the New Age movement, which was actually officially established in this country back in the 70s at the behest of the secret services. I hate that phrase, secret services, it was MI5, whereby Druid and Wiccan orders were, it was suggested, set up to, for want of a better word, net people, good minds, all thinking independently, bring them in and actually teach them these esoteric laws and knowledge. Now you find this in Wicca and Druidry. The Druids incidentally run the world. I don't know if anyone's actually pieced this together from their studies into the conspiracy. This is who is behind it. This does not make Druids or their knowledge wrong or bad in any way. At some point in recent history, secret societies were infiltrated. They were literally taken over. Any researcher, and there's probably people in this room, could actually put a date on that. The point I keep making is that if you go and look, it's been said before, if you look you will find, and I promise you, you will find. What you'll find will be a confusing mess, because there'll always be somebody to tell you, no, that's wrong, I know better. Well, I don't know better. What I do know is what I know, and what I've proven as fact, not truth, and there's a huge difference between fact and truth. And I wish this so-called truth movement would wake up to it, because every day you hear different supposed truths. 9/11 was an inside job. Fact. Other such things. Fact. Let's focus on fact and nothing which relates to somebody's opinion, which is religion usually, or politics. But these are both used and are about to be used, and we're talking within the next few months to a year, maybe 18 months, to pull the biggest scam in history. This has been long planned. So I don't expect or ask anyone to believe me, I simply ask you to take on board what I'm going to show you today. Mike asked me the other day when I've been asked if I would do a talk. I'm a bit reluctant to do this. As I was to go on TV, simply because it's me who ends up looking a prat by talking about certain stuff. And there are so many areas here. Now, I could do a presentation for 2 hours on sacred geometry and put you all to sleep. The point is, what does that sacred geometry mean? What the hell is it? Where did it come from? And what role does it play in the conspiracy itself? I'm using the word conspiracy openly. If anyone here isn't aware that there is a conspiracy going on, it's really to give you an insight into that. And if you are not aware, I apologise now for opening up a doorway, which you will never look back from. You can turn your mind off to what's going to be shown. It's your free will. So, that's the plan. Where to take it from there? I'll pick up a letter I got. And this was in the days when everything was handwritten. It comes from a born-again Christian who felt he had to put the Lord is risen on the top of his little sticker here. And he's responding to something that who it is irrelevant. Many of you might know the guy, but it is irrelevant. And I won't be doing much name dropping today either, for reasons you'll find out. Where do you start? I'll miss out all the rubbish and just hit the relevant bits. He says he doesn't quite follow or understand some of the points that I've made. I was talking to him about Christianity generally, because this is where the big con is going to come soon. If I say anything which offends any Christians in the room, all I ask is that you bear with me, because in offending you, I hope to put it right, if you see what I mean. So if you want to walk out, do so quietly now. Here we go. I asked him, has he ever researched his own religion? He says, have I ever researched my own Christianity? If by this you mean the Bible, etc., of course, I research it each time I go to church, and most days read some of it too. I'm aware of the teachings of Jesus in the New Testament, especially the prophecies. Have you not read Matthew chapter 4 or the book of Revelation? Yes, I am aware that our royal family is not descended from Jesus. Nobody is, because Jesus is God, and in the Gospel of John, chapter 1, they are descended, you can't write this, but what he's saying is they're descended from the black nobility of Europe. I'm not aware how far back they go, but it's all fruitless anyway, just another satanic deception, which Jesus warned us about in Matthew 24, Luke 21. Boring. Whole list of things. David Icke, unfortunately, is a New Ager. Having read one of his books, he offers no message of hope, no Bible prophecy teachings, etc. I'm not bringing about the world I fear. The Illuminati are. And I don't fear it at all. I fear Almighty God and Him alone. It's already written down what's going to happen in the Bible. The truth of Jesus is very wonderful, and yes, all this is leading up to His return. But in the meantime, we're told in the Bible to watch and pray and to warn people of the wrath of God that will descend upon them if they don't have faith in Him. The meaning of 666, which was another question I threw at him, is pretty obvious. Now, note the response here. This is the response you'll get from any Christian about 666, and notice how hollow it is. The meaning of 666 is pretty obvious. If you read Revelation chapter 13, it's in chapter 13 incidentally, which is exactly where you would expect to find it. It will be the number of a man who is to come, the Antichrist, the number adding up to 666 via counting the letters of his name. It is the number of Satan, because God's number is 7. Do you see the logic there, or should I say the absolute lack of it? It is Satan because God's number is 7. I'll show you what God's number is. I'll show you what 7 is, hopefully, shortly. And Satan always falls short of God, which is quite strange, seeing as he overturned him in the original biblical story, but there you go. Why is 666 appearing in many of today's logos and adverts? Yes, the teachings of Jesus are for all humanity, but is all humanity interested? Most people are only interested in money, sex, drugs, the national lottery. I wouldn't go for money, sex and drugs to the national lottery. Football, cars, etc. Mention prophecy, Jesus, the Bible, and most people laugh, mock, or just ignore it. But this too is prophesied in the Bible. Hell, it must be true then. Anyway, I hope I've cleared up a few points you raised. And enclosed is Tex Mars' Cult of Diana tape. I hope you will find it interesting. I certainly did. Has anyone ever heard that tape, incidentally? Tex Mars, The Cult of Diana.
Rings a bell.
If not, may the Lord reveal himself to you through the Holy Spirit. In other words, if I haven't read that, I'm a baddie. And he's giving me forgiveness, which is very gracious of him. And this is the way I felt with so many born-again Christians and Christians over the year. Now, this is not a slagging match against Christianity. As I pointed out, I want to point something out to you, whether you're a Christian or otherwise. They're out there yelling that their church is being destroyed by the Illuminati, that is the whole purpose of the Illuminati, to destroy the church. You might have heard this. That is what they're claiming. In fact, there's been a movie about it recently, hasn't there? Can anyone name that movie, please? Because I'm terrible with names. Mike, man, you've seen it.
So, what, Angels and Demons?
That's the one, yeah. Angels and Demons, thank you. There's a little rider on the end here after he's told me off for daring to question Jesus. I used to be on drugs, addicted to sex, television, drink, etc. So I'm no angel, far from it, but we are all sinners. Thank God we can all be saved from going to hell by believing in the Lord Jesus and repenting of our sins. There you go. That's the answer to everything. If you repent of your sins, it's sorted, yeah? Don't worry about the conspiracy. Jesus is going to take care of it. He's coming back again, you see. There's going to be a second coming. According to Christianity. There always has been, actually. I think they've been waiting 2,000 years for it, haven't they? My response to that is, if he didn't come the first time, how's he going to come a second time? Their response to that usually is to spit at me or call me the son of Satan or whatever. But I'm raising a perfectly valid question. Who was Jesus? This is not the core element of today, but we need to touch on it. And I found myself touching on it sooner than I imagined. Who was Jesus? Well, again, if you go out and look with an open mind, not with a belief in Jesus, not with a will to reject everything that suggests that you might just be wrong, you'll find that immediately, and I do mean immediately, it's very apparent that this is the most researched subject in the world and throughout history. Matter of fact, there is much information out there, although Zeitgeist the movie points out that there isn't much information. And in fact, this proves that Jesus himself never existed and that was actually created as a mythological figure onto which a lot was projected. And this is where the New Age stuff comes in. Onto him was projected the particular character traits or abilities of previous solar gods and deities. Now, I'm not going to go into that. That's been so well covered that if anyone wants to go and Google that, they will soon get a good summary. Or better still, watch Zeitgeist. So, hopefully, Peter's going to update the information in that. As this information grows, the Christians are going to really get on their high horse about it, simply because, in their eye, it's suggesting that Jesus didn't exist and was a myth. Well, I can tell you that's simply not true. I started my research many years ago, actually wanting to prove quite simply that Jesus didn't exist. And that was quite simple, because if you look back in history, there's no mention of him, you know? There's no mention anywhere except back in those times. Similarly, you'll find there's no mention of the equivalent figure within Islam or within Judaism. They're not mentioned. In real life, there's no record of these people. So, logic dictates either they didn't exist and everything's been made up, or they did and everything's been removed so that you can't actually find it. Leaping on a lot, I came into contact with many figures, senior figures within various churches, politicians, secret society members, that call themselves wonderful titles, whatever. Without exception, it was clear to me that it was known, it had been known for a long time who Jesus was, whether he was special or not. Clearly, no secret society throughout the ages has regarded Jesus as the Son of God. They do regard him as a fella, a guy who did something. Now, what I want to summarize today is what you will find if you go and look. This doesn't make it right, but what I am saying is that were you to be in the position where you can sit down with senior church figures and actually get them to talk openly to you about this, as I have done, I won't drop names because I can't. Try it yourselves is what I'm saying. You'll find out that this is true. The first thing they'll say, or point out clearly to you, is yes, the church is well aware that Jesus was made up. And again, I'm terrible with names, but was it not Pope Pius who said this myth of Christ has served us well? It's all on record. But the Christians don't want to believe it. 2,000 years has gone by and Christian history can be researched by anybody. Your Albigensian crusades, the whole thing. To put some perspective on it, if you go back 2,000 years to the time of Jesus and so on, an awful lot was happening. Rome controlled everything, as they do today, incidentally. Nothing ever changed, it just got worse. There was this guy, Jesus. Now, is rarely named in literature because a few tricks have been pulled. Now, if there's any serious researchers here who want to go and look at this particular story, I'll give you some clues. These are things that are known within the church and at a high level. And when you can't believe that, you have to then take what's known and go and have a look for yourself. But the second you do, you will find that the whole story unfolds. I'll touch now on who Jesus was, and that should perhaps bring me to the point where the next part will be relevant. Who was he? Well, he was just this guy. He was a human. Some God didn't put him there. We will get to the esoteric side in a minute, because God puts you all here if you happen to believe in a God. Who was he? Well, history tells you, if you go and look. Who he was the last of a pharaonic line that stemmed from Egypt. That's who he was, in exile. He found himself in Judea. Now, so bear in mind, you have a prince, a king in waiting here, the Judaic line, the bloodline that goes right back. The Bible tells you this clearly. It also tells you he was of the order of Melchizedek, which, again, if you research, is a Pythagorean order. This isn't made up, by the way. It's all, in fact, I think the letter from the born again will quote the references in the Bible where that's mentioned, but I'm not into that. It's not about that. Go and do it for yourself. The order of Melchizedek, Pythagorean order. Jesus named as a priest of this order. Now, Jesus was wanted or intended to be a priest-king in Judea. This priest-king, the duality of being both the priest and the king, is very relevant. You find that people in this world today are manoeuvring now for that position. Jesus did not go through the process that is detailed in the Bible. All right? They say he died on the cross, and yet the Bible itself tells you he didn't die on the cross. The Quran tells you that too. The Bible will point out, if you know how to read it, and I'll give you some insights as to how to do this, that he was taken down off the cross by the very person who put him there. And it's who put him there that's actually the key to history. So anyone researching the last 2,000 years, go take a look at this. What I'm saying is that I discovered this by being told it in the first place, and then found the research afterwards which proves it, and then did that. And I stumbled across many figures who will support that and so on. So at risk of being offensive to anyone who believes in Jesus, he was a priest king who was in exile, arguably the last of a bloodline of the pharaohs, and he wanted his power back. Now again in the Bible it will tell you that his acolytes, the 13 around him, it tells you what they were. In reality they were tax collectors. Jesus taxed his population. That's what he did. He was a king, and he considered it his divine right to tax his population. Didn't like it when the Romans reneged on the agreement. There's huge passages in the Bible about this. It really annoyed him, because suddenly he was not getting the taxes from his people in Judea. He was going to Rome. He stood up, rallied his people, and created a revolution. That's what he was doing. Not only was it a revolution against Rome, it was a revolution to topple Rome and to become Caesar as well. There's a great passage, again I won't go into all the detail, in the Bible that's been disputed by historians for a long, long time as to what its interpretation actually means. And if anyone happens to know one, it is about the bald head. They call him bald head, bald head. That's really strange, because he wasn't bald. In fact, the only description of Jesus that does exist has him with ginger hair, which is an interesting point, because that would put him in Scotland or similar. We will come back to that. That is where he came from, incidentally. Bald head is just, it means Caesar. That's all it meant. Caesar had a bald head. It's just like calling him a baldy coot today. They're saying to Jesus, step forth, baldy. You're Caesar now. These were his friends. These were his people chanting at him. How can you decode all of this? Because it's laid before you. It's what is called a Hermetic code. Now, researchers into the Bible and history have agreed for decades. This is not disputed by anyone, the church either. There's the Pesher code exists within the Bible, which is a simple number-letter swap system, the simplest code that you can come across. These people writing these documents at the time, if they wrote down what they wanted to say, they would be executed by the Romans. This was their enemy. So they didn't write it down, they did it as we do today. We allude to things and we write it down, replacing this with that, whatever. It's a natural human process, but that exists in the Bible. Go and research the Pesher codes. It's all very simple, the Pesher code. What the Pesher code then relays to you is that there are further codes within the Bible. Now, you've all heard of the Bible code, perhaps. I think, was it Drosnin wrote the book about the Bible code? Well worth reading. If you generally look out there, you'll hear, oh, that was overturned ages ago, it's just nonsense, it's just unproven. But I can tell you, if you go and look properly, the great mathematicians around the world have not done that and are most disturbed by what's being uncovered. In other words, they accept it's there, they accept it's showing this stuff, but they don't understand why. Okay? So somewhere along the lines, throughout history, there's a great mystery. I've found over the years that people get confused with the religious aspect. You have the New Age, you have all these different religions coming together in the New Age. It literally is a synthesis, and that was what it was constructed to be. That does not mean that the information in the New Age is wrong. You must take that point from me. Doesn't mean it's right either, but it's a nice synthesis of previous religions. Where do you go from there? Jesus, this character, failed in his revolution. It's probably the greatest failure in human history, because, who was then suddenly turned into a Christ figure. And the reason for this is that Saul, was the only scribe around at the time. If you do your research, you might find that he had a university, and he wrote these books. He wrote many, many books, letters to the Ephesians, you name it, it's in the Bible. He wrote a lot more as well. This is one of the most shocking things that any researcher would come across, but when I mention it, go do your research. Tell me I'm wrong. The church knows this. I'm going to forget some names. I'm very bad with names, so I'm just going to grab a note. So I can remember them. Okay, there's 2 tricks in the Bible, which anyone who wants to research it, and this isn't something you'll do in hours, trust me, but do what I did. Spend a few years over it if you've got the time. I didn't actually, I was dragged into this. I didn't go anything, I literally did find myself and then had to rationalise it and do the research afterwards. Paul, who established the Christian church, yes, also known as Saul, was also somebody else in history that you've all heard of. He was Josephus. Okay? This was the Roman legionnaire who wrote the history of the Jews and the history of the times at that time. It's been noted by researchers. The first thing you notice when you look at Josephus is his history is very similar to that which is put forward as being the history of Jesus. So therefore, he was trying to compete with this Jesus guy. He was trying to be better than him and steal some of the nice stuff that Jesus had done. No, that's not true. That's the first conclusion you draw. The actual truth is that Josephus was Paul. And Paul hated Jesus. He was his main contender. Jesus, in the Bible openly, calls Paul the liar. Okay? And if you ask a Christian where this thing, the liar, came from, they'll embellish that and say, oh, actually, he was a good man. Okay? Again, this is known by, the last person I spoke to about this was a bishop, and he simply nodded and understands this. So, you have this Christian element that do not understand that Paul was Josephus. Paul was also the character called Joseph, Josephus. It's all there. That doesn't prove anything, but again, these are the same people. You have to go find the connection for yourself, and hopefully I'll help you do that. He was Joseph of Arimathea. This guy was supposed to be the uncle of Jesus, and so on. At that point, we're touching on the poem by William Blake, and did those feat in ancient times. William Blake was a druid. I don't know if anyone's aware of that. I have pictures of him being initiated into the order that I was in. Together, incidentally, with Winston Churchill, many others. Okay? So when you look out there and see your leaders over at Bohemian Grove doing their druidic ceremonies, it's very real. That is what they are. Druidry and druids are not bad. In fact, they were the original religion in this country. In fact, they're the ones who taught this Jesus character an awful lot anyway. But that's a long, long story. So, I discussed this actually a few years ago with Sir George Trevelyan, who's known to be, they claim he set up the New Age movement. He was the best friend of Prince Charles. Once I started talking about this, it was not friendly anymore. And I wondered why that might be. And the reason is because it is the great scam that's about to be pulled. It's actually being pulled under your nose now. So, that said, go do your research on Jesus. Don't necessarily believe what's being put forward by the truth movement at the moment, that this guy did not exist. He did exist. Who he was and what he knew is the key to the conspiracy. because for 2,000 years there's been a line of people, the Knights Templar being one, who know this full story and have kept it within their secret societies. The church, of course, with Paul, tried to destroy Jesus. That's actually what they did for hundreds of years. Any mention of the true story of Jesus would be squashed and people would be murdered. So it went underground. That story is there today. If you come across a Freemason or secret society member, they're not going to know this. I'm telling you, this is known at the top, but anyone can research this. Particularly once you know the code that is detailed throughout the Bible, which we will move on to. Mike, time have you got?
We are just shortly to 3 o'clock, right? At least another 15-20.
So, we're at the point in this conspiracy as it unfolds where it's clear to all that there's some insidious cabal. Many people call them Freemason bankers operating behind this. You've got religious and spiritual groups announcing their expectations for what's going to happen in 2012. Some people are expecting disasters, all sorts. Some of you I know have insight into 2012, others might think it's a load of tosh. It's actually, in my opinion, not a load of tosh. It is the one thing that fundamentally proves throughout. And again, this is because of the coding mechanism. So we're all hypnotized into some sort of apathy, and you might think I'm talking about what you would call sheeple, but I'm not. I'm talking about you and the truth movement and me. The apathy exists and the confusion exists. This is a confusion movement, and I've watched it develop. I was longing for the day. I sort of knew one day I'd be talking about this, and here I am, but it's not as clear-cut as it first appears to be. Now, you wouldn't expect it to be. There's a lot of money. This is the biggest black operation in history, the best financed operation in history, and it is to impose a new world order that's long been planned by these secret societies. The secret societies, however, split. Now, I want to ask anyone in this room a question. It may be that no one can answer it, but it's a fairly simple question for anyone who's looked at secret societies. What have they been researching? What do they exist for? There are exceptions, of course, but I'm talking the general scheme of things. Can anyone here tell me what the secret societies researched?
Well, the prime kind of thing about the Freemasons was that always were searching for the Word of God, weren't they?
Yeah, okay. That's the Freemasonic angle. They're basically searching for what I've been telling you about. They know this story that they're told by the churches and so on is not right. They also have an inkling of what the true story was, and at the top, believe me, they do. I've only just touched on it. The story is amazing. So if anyone is afraid that by saying Jesus was a man, that I'm some sort of satanic person trying to put Christianity down, I am not. What I'm saying is that when you understand who Jesus was, what he taught, how he learned it, and it's here to this day, that is what should be coming back. That is what's bubbling underneath. This knowledge, it's bubbling into the new age, but you are kept away from the fundamental truth. They want to bring Christians with them to unify all of this into one theocracy, as they call it. In fact, their definition is, and I've forgotten now, it's basically a theocracy of business, where business and theocracy runs the world. Their theocracy. The people are waking up to the fact that the universe is a wonderful place, and there are certain things that everyone is becoming aware of in nature, which is pretty amazing, as if there's an underlying order to everything. Wonderful program at the minute, I think, called Wonders of the Solar System. Scientist working at CERN, musician as well, used to play for D. Ream, I believe. Great guy. And in his program, he's openly stating these things are connected. He touched on the moon in the last program, noticing these amazing things, which are, of course, coincidence, he says. All right. Now I believe, I discovered the other day, David Icke's writing a book, or is about to release a book, which very much touches on the moon, these coincidences and so on. I've been writing about this, as many of you might know, for a while. It's going to be interesting to see what David comes up with. I know one or two of his conclusions, and I have to say, I heartily agree. No doubt he'll take it beyond that. So it's into that area that we'll move probably after the break, and we'll take it from there. So in summary so far, all I'm pointing out is that the story of Jesus is false, constructed by the church, around a very real happening at the time. I said earlier that Jesus, for example, created a revolution, that he was a revolutionary. And yet the revolution was in AD 70, for anyone who's done the research. That's when the Jews were overthrown and so on. They failed in their revolution, basically. And yet Jesus was crucified AD 30, whenever. Not true. Not true at all. You know what's known at the top of the church? You read in the Bible and many other references, and he went into the wasteland for 40 years. And all this sort of thing. 40, 40, 40. I'll show you why 40 later. What it literally means is that the story they're telling you actually took place 40 years later. Now, I don't expect everything to come together for you there, but there's two deceptions throughout history. Josephus was Paul. He was also, I'm terrible with names, it will come back to me. And if you don't believe this, do go look. As I say, you're entitled to your opinions, but this is known. Paul and Saul were Josephus. He was also Joseph of Arimathea. He was also Rabbi Yohanan. That's the Jesus character in the Jewish faith. All right? He was the same person. How could he pretend to be all of these people? He didn't really pretend to be. He had them. These were pen names. He didn't sit behind a desk and just write out these gospels and things. He literally had a university. He was the largest employer on the planet. He had over 300 scribes. Tells you this. A university of scribes writing these very documents that were then altered or whatever by the church. That's what he did. It was the biggest undertaking ever to gather these documents, put them together, and then create the religions, which is what Paul tried to do, which is why Jesus repeatedly called him the liar and stood against him, pointing out that you do not build a church. Lift up a rock and there I am. This is the Gospel of Thomas, the most suppressed gospel ever. And if anyone's ever read it, you'll sharp see why. Wonderful film called Stigmata. I saw a few years ago. If you haven't seen it, watch that. The directors were very much aware of the story I'm telling, and that's what the film is about. Behind our reality lies another reality. How would you put it? A spiritual world. So you may have belief in communicating with spirits. It's hard to define this. There is a spiritual reality behind our physical reality. Some of you have insights into it. Some of you have beliefs like, yes, that's Jesus, or it's the Buddhist faith, or whatever. No, this spiritual reality has been known for thousands of years, literally. It is the ancient knowledge. How can that be? Well, mankind existed on this planet for hundreds of thousands of years. Not as a matter of speculation, but a matter of absolute proof. You can do it tomorrow. You can go out and prove this. Alright? Again, it's known in the secret societies. Question is, did the knowledge evolve over time? Or was it given to them by external sources? Or something else? What is this knowledge? Well, a lot of you are seeing it in the New Age now. Talk about resonance and so on. But what they don't want you to know, and when I say they, I mean those who are indoctrinating this New Age movement. And I don't intend to name any of them, as some of you might have your own insights into that. I couldn't claim to be right as to who's doing what. It's not relevant. It simply is happening. So, from what I've said, imagine that tomorrow this New World Order body, whoever they are, doesn't matter, presents a second coming for you. Project Blue being whatever you want to call it. What are the Christians around the world going to do? I won't even go into it. If you can ponder that question, you will see the great scam that's about to be pulled. It will result in the Christian element turning against, well, this esoteric knowledge will be called satanic. It's not satanic at all. It's just the nature of the world. So, what I'll do, spend 5-6 minutes bringing it round. I know I've majored on the Christian thing. I know I've not proven anything to you. I have given you 2 keys there. Josephus being these different characters, provably so. And if it comes to another lecture, I'll do that. He was the same characters. You also have this 30 to 40 year offset. And thanks for that. Which actually brings all the timelines in the Bible into line. What they're trying to avoid is the fact that Jesus had a revolution AD 70. They don't need you to know that. Because the second you do, history falls into place. Now I've taken all of these facts, and the scientific ones we'll go on to later, up in front of some of the world's leading scientists over the last 20 or 30 years. I won't name drop, but you'll have heard of them all. And I've challenged them with this. Not one of them, and I'm talking theologians as well, not one of them has come back with what I've shown them and said, that's wrong. But I'm going to show you facts in the second half, which I ask you, prove me wrong. We're going to touch on sacred geometry, this very complicated subject. It's not. It's not at all. I'm going to show you the one thing, there's 2 laws actually, but one element which touches and unifies all of sacred geometry, and hopefully give you some sort of understanding as to why it's relevant, because this is the weapon that's being used against you. Okay? Any questions at this point? No, you're all yeah.
Yeah, no.
Go on then.
I know Mike wants to stop now. Where did the church come into? In 325, when the Nicene Council got together, and there was a lot of stuff taken out of the Bible.
Yeah.
So how much of that what was taken out wasn't true?
It's not that stuff was taken. Well, that's an unanswerable if you think about it. But it's not that stuff was taken out of the Bible. All right, because the Bible was just formed then. It wasn't taken out as such. They decided what they were going to put in. I think is what you're getting.
Because the book of Enoch.
Yeah.
Was missing.
You have, and these books are there to read. Now I fell into this originally because a colleague, or the brother of a colleague, was a priest in the Roman Catholic Church, went on secondment, came back with a copy of should I say the original Lord's Prayer, and a copy of the Gospel of Thomas. All right. This actually became a plot in the movie Stigmata later on. Coincidentally, there's not really coincidences about any of this sort of thing. The church has a secret, and the day you find it out, it ceases to exist. It does not destroy and will not destroy your spiritual beliefs or insights at all. It's no coincidence that you're working with a church today who is being accused of raping children, child molestation for a long time, people doing all sorts of things. This truly is, and this is a hard one for some people to accept, but it truly is, because if you're looking for your Satan, it was long established in the organised church. That's what they do behind the scenes. Yes.
What do you think of the recent news that Pope's chief exorcist, who apparently the film is based on, has come out and said the devil is in the Vatican?
Oh yeah, actually I heard that yesterday on the radio, I think. Well, the devil is in the Vatican. He's using it rather as an excuse, like the devil's coming amongst all these good people, and as soon as we root him out, everything will be all right again. Well, they've taken a bloody long time over it because it's 2,000 years on. This organisation controls the world. Did you know, for example, that every long-distance or deep space telescope on the planet is owned by the Roman Catholic Church. Why is that? Are they looking for God? Are they? Why is that? Ask why. That's all it's about. Look at facts and ask why. Because this actually will become very obvious to anybody. It's almost insane to talk about a satanic organisation. Get the word Satan out of your head. I don't know if anyone, again, if you look back throughout history, this character that became called Satan was actually the bringer of light, was referred to. Well, they had to condemn this character. They really have to. And when I say character, I use the word loosely, alright? It's not like it was a person. This character brought light. He introduced light. He brought it to everybody, and everyone was like, oh, but then he turned against God and was cast out. Or did the church turn against it? I'm going to show you in the next part, and I'll draw this to a halt now, the great secret of history. It's so stunningly simple that it's going to go over your heads, alright? How can there possibly be an answer to life, the universe, and everything? Well, there is. Okay? And when you see it, it is so simple. It'll take, for some of you, I'm sure, a while for the implications of what you're going to see to sink in. I'm not going into the depths of sacred geometry. I'm going to show you the very core element of it, from which everything else springs. You don't need to be a mathematician. I studied number theory and maths and all sorts to try and get my head around some of the stuff I was being shown by the very people that we're talking about. Only to realise that it's actually so incredibly simple. I didn't have to do that. However, the number theory research did bring me across the mathematical proof for it as well, which we'll touch on. So, there you go. Sacred geometry in the next half. If we take 15-20 minutes out, then come back, and I'm going to hit you with something that's going to make your jaws drop. Probably in disappointment. We ready?
Yep. Take a pew.
Hello again, everybody. This is where, if it hasn't already gone wrong, it certainly will. Alright? Meet the prof. This is Bob. Bob the Moog. I'm going to talk to you about sound. I'm going to show you the greatest secret in the universe. You can make of this what you will. It's so simple that you probably won't make much of it. But I do warn you, and I do mean this seriously, when you see this, and if you make a conscious connection, you will never look back. Alright? So, at some sort of low level, what I'm saying here is that you're dealing with an archetype which will trigger stuff in you that you subconsciously will not be able to stop. So if there's anyone a bit nervous about that, a bit like being in a hypnotist shop. I'm not going to do anything dangerous. This is what's used against you all the time. Alright? And you won't even see, I guess, most of you, the warning, or why I've given that warning. But I'm giving it. Okay? I've just asked a question before, going back to the telescopes, that all the telescopes around the world, or the deep space ones, with one exception actually, are owned by the Roman Catholic Church. Why would they do that, he says? Why do you think? The fact I've given you is they are owned by them. As to why that might be and what they're doing, answer it for yourself. It is glaringly obvious though, once you start researching. Sound, key to everything. Okay? In the beginning was the Word. Wasn't that the very opening line in the Bible? And the Word, as any researcher will know, refers to sound. It wasn't God saying hi or whatever. It's a note. It's a note. Here it is. Okay, this note's scaled up by a good number of octaves. If I actually played you the real note, it would potentially kill you. Because it's at a level that interfere with your heart rate and so on. So I'm doing this just in E, just as an example. There's nothing dangerous about this. You have there an oscillator. You hear it. I'm going to show you soon this soon, alright? I'll give you one.
That's okay for a minute, but you don't read all the time.
There's your read note, just as an example. That's one oscillator, one note. It's sweeping because I've got the filter on. That's the playing sound, alright? But I like it down there because it sounds good, alright? We're going to add another oscillator to it. There's now two notes in there. Can you hear them? Probably not, because luckily I've tuned it right. It's exactly, it's not actually, but it's close on or thereabouts the same as the other. It's beginning to phase now over time. I'm going to add a third oscillator. When you add a third note to two others, not only are the first two interacting slightly and causing it to beat, but the third note will interact with them individually and together, unless you tune it perfectly, which I've nearly done. So there's one note there, but there's actually three. The classic sound nearly of the mini Moog. You've got three notes creating one sound, alright? Without getting into the technology, one of them is active, one of them is passive, and the other is a neutral. The neutral one affects what the other two do. I'm going to slightly detune the neutral one. If I can find it. There we go. You get a beating now. I'm going to detune the second one just very slightly, so your waveforms are not perfectly together, they're slightly out of phase. There you've got three notes, all slightly out of phase, creating a much deeper sound. What you could call alive, it's bringing the note alive. That's the classic sound of the mini Moog. Do you hear how all the oscillators work together? They're creating one note, but within that note is beating. I'll take it down to 2. This is where it might get painful if you want to put your fingers in your ears. I'll try not to make it painful. There's your first note on its own. There's your second one. And I'm going to take that out of tune so it beats against the first waveform. Okay, that will beat constantly. If I set that at a certain rate, I could knock you out. We're a few octaves off that rate, so it's nowhere near. Alright? If I transmit that sound at you, you will collapse. If it were the right note and the right frequencies. Not the frequencies together, but the detuning. Notice how I can bring this one back in. In theory, yeah. So at some point they sit together almost without beating at all. Which is probably about there. It's still phasing slightly, but do you get the point?
You had it before.
Yeah, well they're analog oscillators, so they will vary according to the electrical input as well, so you'll never quite get it stable without a vernier, as they call it. Point being, there's the beats caused by a slight detune. That's something like 1800ths of a note tuned down, and it starts to beat. Why have I shown you that? Because I like my toy, basically. Sound is the key to everything. Sound is what makes you. Sound is what makes all matter. Sound literally is everything. If there's a scientist in the